I thought walking across that stage would finally make me feel seen until I looked into the crowd and realized my family's seats were empty on purpose. While everyone else got cheers and flowers, I got silence. Then photos of them celebrating someone else. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I changed my name, disappeared. And years later, a coffee-stained program showed up with a note that said I wasn't forgotten, I was erased. The coffee in my cup was 3 hours old, a stagnant, oily film resting on the surface, but I drank it anyway, at 32 years old. My body had forgotten how to function on sleep. It ran entirely on caffeine and a frantic, brittle sort of hope. The neon numbers on the office microwave read 7:15 in the evening. Most of the other desks at the small marketing firm where I worked were already empty. The blue glow of monitors powered down for the night. But I was still there, printing the final draft of a portfolio I did not need for work, but for the life I was trying to build after 5 o'clock. I was exhausted. It was a bone-deep, marrow-sucking exhaustion that made my hands tremble when I held a pen. For the last 4 years, I had lived a double life. By day, I was the reliable, invisible administrative assistant who fixed toner cartridges and smoothed over client complaints. By night, I was a student again, sitting in lecture halls filled with 20-year-olds who wore pajama pants to class and did not know what it meant to pay a mortgage. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the grit of mascara flaking against my skin. I was doing this for a reason. That is what I told myself every time my alarm screamed at 5 in the morning. I was doing this to be done, to be finished, to finally hand my parents a piece of paper that proved I was worth the space I occupied. My degree was in communications, with a minor in digital media. It was not a medical degree. It was not law. It was not the sort of thing that made headlines in the local paper of Briar Glen, the river town where I grew up. But it was mine. I had paid for every credit hour, every textbook, and every late-night parking fee. I looked at the calendar on my phone. 3 days. 3 days until graduation. My phone buzzed on the desk. Rattling against the hard laminate, the screen lit up with the name Mom. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the Pavlovian response of a daughter who had spent 3 decades trying to anticipate the weather patterns of her mother's mood. I cleared my throat, forcing a brightness into my voice that I did not feel. "Hey, Mom," I said. "I was just thinking about you, Sadie." Her voice came through, tinny and laced with the specific, low-level anxiety she wore like perfume. "You are working late again. You know stress creates wrinkles. Honey, you are already starting late in life with this career shift. You do not want to look tired on top of it." I closed my eyes. It was a standard opening, a jab wrapped in concern. "I have to finish some things up," I said, keeping my tone steady. "I want everything clear for the weekend. I am so excited you guys are coming." There was a pause on the line, a beat of silence that lasted just long enough to make my stomach turn over. "Right," my mother said. "The graduation. Your father was just asking if it is going to be a long ceremony. You know his back acts up if he sits on those bleachers too long, and the drive is 3 hours. Sadie, that is a lot for us right now." I gripped the phone tighter. I had sent the date 4 months ago. I had sent a reminder 2 months ago. I had texted the address and the parking instructions last week. I had even offered to pay for their gas in a hotel room, but my mother had waved it off, saying that staying in a hotel was frivolous when they could just drive back the same day. "It is in the university arena." "Mom," I said, "it is actual seats, not bleachers, and I bought the tickets for the lower section, so you do not have to climb stairs. I told you that." I know. She sighed. The sound of a martyr being asked to carry one more cross. "We are coming. Sadie, you do not have to be so sensitive. Family shows up. That is what we do. Even when it is inconvenient." The word hung in the air. Inconvenient. "Thank you," I said, hating the gratitude in my voice. "It means a lot to me." "We will be there," she said. "Just do not expect a parade. It is just a bachelor's degree. Sadie, most people do this when they are 22. But we are proud of you for finally settling into something." She let the sentence trail off. leaving the implication dangling there, finally settling, finally stopping the embarrassing flailing of my 20s. I hung up the phone 5 minutes later and stared at the dark window of the office. My reflection stared back pale, tired, blurring at the edges. Briar Glen was a town where memory had a long shelf life, to my family, and to the neighbors who watched from their porches. I was not Sadie Long, the woman who worked 50 hours a week and maintained a 4.0 grade average. I was Sadie the flighty one, Sadie the dramatic one, Sadie who moved away to the city and thought she was better than everyone else, only to struggle. They loved my struggles. My struggles were comfortable for them. They fit the narrative. When I was failing, or tired, or broke, my mother was affectionate. She would send care packages and call me her poor baby. It was only when I succeeded that the air got thin. I packed my bag, turning off the lights. I needed to believe them. I needed to believe that this time, for this milestone, they would put aside the passive aggression and just sit in the stands and clap. I wanted a picture. Just one picture of me in the cap and gown, sandwiched between my parents, smiling like a normal family, the week unspooled in a blur of final exams and exit interviews. I moved through the days with a singular focus, ticking boxes off a list: pickup gown, iron stole, confirm parking pass, on Wednesday. 2 days before the ceremony, my sister called. Chloe was 3 years younger than me, but she had mastered the art of being the baby early on. She had stayed in Briar Glen, married a man who worked for the county, and produced 2 grandchildren who were the center of my parents' universe. Chloe did not have to prove anything. Her existence was proof enough. "Sadie," she said, and I knew immediately from the breathless, high pitch of her voice that she wanted something. "What is it, Chloe?" I asked. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, trying to steam the wrinkles out of my polyester gown with a handheld steamer. "Do not use that tone," she snapped, then softened. "Look, I am panicking, seriously panicking. It is Mom." I froze, the steamer hissing in my hand. What happened? "Is she okay?" "She is fine. Physically," Chloe said, "but she is a wreck about the house. You know the water heater has been acting up. Well, it finally died. Completely. There is water all over the utility room, and Dad is losing his mind, and Mom is crying because she says she cannot host. She cannot have people over with the house smelling like damp mildew." I frowned. "Have people over? Who is coming over?" Chloe stumbled over her words. "Just, neighbors, Aunt Linda, for Sunday. For the usual Sunday dinner. Sunday dinner was usually just them. But I let it go." "Okay," I said. "So they need to call a plumber." "They did," Chloe said. "But the guy wants a deposit before he starts, and Dad is waiting for his pension check to clear on Monday. They do not have the liquidity right now. Sadie, Mom is stressing out so bad. She is talking about not being able to make the drive to your thing because she is afraid to leave the house with the water damage." My stomach dropped. This was it. This was the exit strategy. How much, I asked. $600, Chloe said quickly. "Just for the deposit. Dad will pay you back next week." I would do it, but we just paid for the kids' summer camp and our account is drained. "Please, Sadie, if you don't do it, Mom is going to spiral. And they are not going to come on Friday. You know how she gets." I looked at the gown hanging on the doorframe. I had saved for months to pay for the remaining tuition balance. My savings account was sitting at barely 4 figures. $600 was my rent cushion. It was the money I was going to use to take them out to a nice lunch after the ceremony. I hesitated. "Sadie," Chloe pressed, "do you want them there or not?" I closed my eyes. It felt like extortion, but the emotional kind that left no bruises. If I said no, and they didn't come, it would be my fault. I would be the selfish one who let the house rot while I pranced around in a cap and gown. "I will transfer it," I said, my voice heavy. "Tell Dad to look for the Zelle notification. You are a lifesaver," Chloe said, her relief audible. "Seriously, I will make sure they leave on time Friday. I promise. I sent the money. I watched the balance in my account drop. A digital hemorrhage that made my chest tight. It is temporary. I told myself, it is for peace. It is the price of admission to have my family watch me succeed. Graduation morning dawned gray and humid. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening rain. But I did not care. I woke up before the alarm, adrenaline humming in my veins. I spent an hour on my hair, curling it into waves that I hoped would hold up under the humidity. I did my makeup carefully, using the expensive setting spray I had bought just for today. I put on the white dress I had chosen 3 months ago. At 8 o'clock, I arrived at the arena. The parking lot was already filling up with families. I saw fathers carrying bouquets of roses wrapped in cellophane. I saw mothers adjusting their daughters' collars. I saw banners and balloons. I walked to the designated graduate holding area. My phone clutched in my hand. I had texted the group chat mom, Dad, Chloe at 6 a.m. Good morning, I am heading to the arena. Drive safe. Love you guys. There had been no response. I found my place in the line. The alphabetization of our names meant I was sandwiched between a girl named Lewis and a boy named Lopez. Lewis was frantically texting someone. My grandma is lost in the parking garage. She laughed, looking at me. She refuses to read the signs. Is your family here yet? Not yet, I said, checking my screen. They have a long drive. I checked the time. 8:30. The ceremony started at 9. I sent another text to my father. Are you guys close? Traffic can be bad near the exit. The 3 dots of a typing indicator appeared. I held my breath. Running a little late, the text read, Traffic. Start without us. I stared at the screen. Start without us. As if the university would pause the proceedings for Frank and Eleanor Long. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It was fine. They would miss the processional. That was the boring part anyway. As long as they were there when my name was called. That was what mattered. The music started. Pomp and circumstance. It was cliched, heavy, and magnificent. We began to march. The arena was a cavern of noise cheers, air horns, applause. The sound washed over me, vibrating in my chest. I scanned the lower level. Section 104, row G, seats 12 through 15. I had bought the tickets. I had mailed them the physical copies because my father didn't trust digital codes. I walked past the section, craning my neck, empty, 3 blue plastic seats, distinct in a sea of people. A reserved sign I had printed myself was taped to the back of one, a pathetic little flag claiming territory for a country that hadn't arrived. I took my seat on the floor. The speeches began. The dean of the college spoke about resilience, about the future, about the way education transformed the soul. I heard none of it. I sat with my phone hidden in the folds of my gown, refreshing my messages every 30 seconds. 8:45, 8:50. My phone buzzed. It was a call. Mom. I ducked my head, shielding the screen with my sleeve, and answered, Mom. Are you inside? I can send someone to the door with the tickets if you forgot them. Sadie. Her voice was breathless, shaky. It was the voice she used for tragedies. Mom. What is it? It is a mess. Sadie. A complete mess. What happened? Did you get into an accident? No accident, she said. It is just everything. Your father is shouting, and Chloe is upset, and I just cannot handle the noise right now. I am having palpitations. I froze. Where are you? We had to turn around, she said. The world stopped. The cheering crowd, the speeches, the girl named Lewis shifting in her seat beside me. It all dissolved into a high-pitched ringing in my ears. You turned around, I whispered. We had a situation with the house again, she said, her voice gaining strength, shifting from victim to manager, and your father forgot his medication. And honestly, Sadie, the stress of this drive was just too much. I told you it was a lot for us. I told you. You are not coming, I asked. The words felt like stones in my mouth. Sadie, please do not do this, she snapped. Do not make this about you. We are having a crisis here. We are trying to protect the house. You are 32 years old. You do not need us to hold your hand while you walk across a stage. It is selfish to expect us to drop everything when things are falling apart here. Selfish. I looked at the empty seats in section 104. I looked at the family 3 rows up. A father holding a sign that said, "We love you, Sarah. I am graduating." "Mom," I said, my voice breaking. "I know. And we are happy for you," she said, dismissive. "We will celebrate later, when things are calm. Just go get your paper. We will talk next week. I have to go. Your father is calling the insurance company." The line went dead. I sat there. The phone was dark in my hand. The ceremony continued. It was a slow, agonizing torture. I watched row after row of students stand up, their faces beaming. I watched them wave to their families. I watched them blow kisses. When the dean called the L names, I stood up. My legs felt like wood. I walked to the stage. I heard the announcer's voice, booming and impersonal. "Sadie Elizabeth Long." I walked across the stage. I shook the hand of a man I did not know. I took the diploma folder. There was no cheer for me. There was polite applause, the scattered, obligatory clapping of strangers who were waiting for their own children. I looked at section 104 one last time. It was still empty. I walked down the stairs on the other side of the stage and went back to my seat. I did not cry. I was too hollow to cry. I felt stripped, flayed open in a room full of people wearing their joy like armor. The rest of the ceremony passed in a gray haze when it was over, and the caps were thrown into the air. I did not throw mine. I held it in my lap. I navigated the exit crowd alone. I dodged the family photos, the hugs, the bouquets of flowers thrust into surprised arms. I kept my head down, walking fast, my gown billowing around me like a black sail. I reached my car, a beat-up sedan parked in the furthest lot. I stripped off the gown and threw it into the back seat. I threw the cap on top of it. I sat in the driver's seat, the diploma folder on the passenger seat beside me. I picked up my phone. No texts, no voicemails, just that single missed call from earlier, before the ceremony had started, which I hadn't seen. I opened my banking app. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see the damage. Maybe I wanted to see the $600 that had bought me absolutely nothing. I scrolled to the transaction history. There it was. The transfer to my father. Zelle transfer, $600. But something else caught my eye. A pending transaction on my credit card. I frowned. I hadn't used my credit card in 2 weeks. I kept it for emergencies only, and I checked it obsessively. It was a charge for $40. Briar Glen Florist. I stared at it. Why would there be a charge from a florist in Briar Glen on my card? I clicked on the transaction details. It had been authorized yesterday. Then I remembered, years ago, I had given my mother my credit card number to pay for a funeral arrangement for my great-aunt because her card wasn't working. She must have written it down. She must have kept it. I felt a cold prickle of dread. I opened my email, the old Yahoo account I rarely used anymore, the one my parents still had on file as my primary contact. I searched for receipt. There it was. A confirmation email from the Riverview Event Center. I opened it. "Dear Eleanor, thank you for your payment. This email confirms the receipt of your deposit of $600 for the rental of the Magnolia Room on Sunday, May 24th. We look forward to hosting the celebration party. Balance due $400. I read the date again. Sunday, May 24th, this coming Sunday. I read the amount again. $600. The exact amount I had transferred for the emergency plumber. I scrolled down. There was a breakdown of the event details. Event type: promotion party, family gathering. Honoree Chloe Long. Notes: please ensure the chocolate fountain is set up by 4:00 p.m. The air left the car. There was no broken water heater. There was no mildew. There was no emergency. My sister had been promoted, and they were throwing her a party at the nicest venue in town, and they had used my money to pay for the deposit, the money I had sent to save them, the money I had scraped together from overtime and skipped lunches. They had taken my money to throw a party for my sister on the weekend of my graduation. A party I wasn't even invited to. I looked at the diploma on the seat. Sadie Elizabeth Long. I looked at the phone. The silence from them was deafening. It wasn't just that they hadn't come. It wasn't just that they had forgotten. They had robbed me to celebrate her. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, ragged and sharp. It sounded like glass breaking. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. The sadness that had been weighing me down all morning began to evaporate, burned away by a sudden, searing heat. It wasn't anger. Anger was hot and messy. This was cold. This was clarity. They didn't just forget. They chose. I started the car. The engine sputtered and caught. I didn't look back at the arena. I didn't look at the families taking pictures on the lawn. I put the car in gear and drove toward the highway. I wasn't going back to my apartment to cry. I wasn't going to call them and beg for an explanation. I was done. I just didn't know yet how done I was. But as I merged onto the interstate, watching the city of my education fade in the rearview mirror, I knew one thing for certain. The Sadie Long, they knew the one who paid the bills, the one who begged for love, the one who saved a seat for people who never showed up. She had died in that empty chair today. And whoever was driving this car was someone they had never met before. I sat on the beige carpet of my living room, my back pressed against the front of the sofa, watching the afternoon light fade across the floorboards. My apartment was quiet. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, pressurized, as if the air itself were holding its breath, waiting for me to scream. But I did not scream. I just sat there, clutching my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. The drive home from the graduation ceremony had been a blur of autopilot driving and white noise. I had parked, walked up the 3 flights of stairs, and locked the deadbolt behind me. I had thrown the diploma folder onto the kitchen table, where it landed with a flat, insignificant slap. Now, I was bargaining. The cold clarity I had felt in the car was beginning to fracture under the weight of 32 years of conditioning. It was a habit, a survival mechanism I had honed since childhood when my family hurt me. I immediately began searching for the logic that made it my fault, or at least, made it an accident. Maybe the florist charge was a mistake. I thought, maybe the email receipt was for something else. Maybe the promotion party is next month, and the deposit was just due today. I unlocked my phone. I opened the family group chat. The last message was still my father's text, running a little late. Traffic. Start without us. I scrolled up. I read my own messages, the cheery updates, the parking maps, the offer to buy tickets. It looked so pathetic now. I looked like a dog begging for scraps at a table where everyone else was already full. I navigated to Facebook. I rarely used it, keeping the account mostly to see updates from distant cousins or high school friends who had stayed in Briar Glen. My mother, however, lived on the platform. She curated her life there with the precision of a museum director. I typed her name into the search bar. Her profile picture was a selfie of her and my sister, Chloe, taken at Easter. They were cheek to cheek, smiling with a warmth that never seemed to extend to me. I clicked on her timeline. The first post had been uploaded 40 minutes ago. It was an album titled, "So Proud of Our Girl, Big Things Ahead." My breath hitched in my throat. I tapped the album. The first photo was of a sign on an easel outside a set of double doors. The Magnolia Room. Congratulations, Chloe. The second photo was the room itself. I recognized it immediately. It was the Riverview Event Center, the place I had seen in the email receipt. There were round tables with white linens, centerpieces of pink lilies and baby's breath, and a buffet line gleaming under warm lights. The third photo was my sister. She was wearing a sash that said, "Promoted," holding a glass of champagne, laughing with her head thrown back. The fourth photo stopped my heart. It was my parents. My mother was wearing her good navy dress, the one she saved for weddings. My father was in his gray suit. They were standing on either side of Chloe, beaming. My father had his arm around Chloe's shoulder, squeezing her tight. My mother was looking at Chloe with a rapt, adoring expression, the kind of look I had chased my entire life and never once caught. I looked at the timestamp on the post. 42 minutes ago. I looked at the time on my phone. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They were there right now, while I was walking across the stage to silence. They were driving to the venue, while I was sitting in my car realizing I had been robbed. They were eating appetizers paid for with my money. I swiped to the next photo. It was a group shot. Aunt Linda was there. My cousins from the next town over. Even the neighbors, the Millers, were there. I zoomed in on the buffet table in the background. I saw the chocolate fountain. Please ensure the chocolate fountain is set up by 4 o'clock. I felt a physical blow to my stomach. A nausea so violent I had to put the phone down on the carpet. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't a water heater. It wasn't a flat tire. It was a choice. My phone buzzed against the carpet fibers. I flinched. A text message. It was from my cousin, Jenna. She was in the background of the group photo, holding a plate of fruit. "Hey, Sadie?" The text read, "I didn't know you weren't coming today. We missed you." I stared at the words. "I didn't know you weren't coming." My fingers trembled as I typed back. "What do you mean?" Jenna's response came quickly. The 3 dots dancing on the screen. "Your mom said you didn't want the attention. She said you asked them not to go to the graduation because you thought it was silly to make a big deal out of it at your age, and that you didn't want to come to the party because you were busy with work." I read the message 3 times. She said you asked them not to go. My mother hadn't just skipped my graduation. She had rewritten history to make herself the victim of my indifference. She had told the entire extended family that I was the one who had rejected them, that I was the cold, career-obsessed daughter who couldn't be bothered with family celebrations. And then, a second message from Jenna popped up. Also, "Congrats on the degree I didn't realize you actually finished. Your mom made it sound like you were still taking classes." I dropped the phone. The betrayal was a physical thing now, a cold iron band tightening around my ribs. They hadn't just stolen my money and my moment, they had stolen my name. They had painted a portrait of me for the world that justified their neglect. I stood up. I paced the small length of my living room. I felt like I was burning up. I needed to hear her say it. I needed to hear her voice. I picked up the phone and dialed my mother. It rang 4 times. I imagined her looking at the screen, rolling her eyes, maybe showing the screen to Chloe and sighing. "Here she goes." "Hello?" Her voice was smooth, pleasant. There was ambient noise in the background, clinking silverware, the low hum of conversation. "You are at the Riverview," I said. I did not say hello. I did not ask how she was. There was a pause. The background noise seemed to dim, as if she had stepped into a hallway. "Sadie," she said, her tone shifting instantly to a practiced, weary patience. "I told you we were dealing with a crisis. I saw the pictures. Mom, I saw the chocolate fountain. I saw the sash." Silence. Thick, heavy silence. Then, she sighed. It was a sound of disappointment, as if I had failed a test she hadn't told me I was taking. "We did not want to upset you," she said. "Upset me?" I laughed, and it sounded hysterical in the quiet apartment. "You told me the water heater broke. You took $600 from me to pay for a plumber, and you used it to pay for a party for Chloe. On the day of my graduation, it was a misunderstanding." She said quickly, "The money? We borrowed it. We intended to pay you back. But the deposit had to be paid. Sadie, and you know how hard it is for your sister right now. She worked so hard for this promotion. I worked hard too," I shouted. "I worked for 4 years. I graduated today. And you weren't there." "Lower your voice," she hissed. "You are being hysterical. This is exactly why we did not tell you. You always make everything about yourself." "Make everything about myself," I repeated, stunned. "Mom, you lied to me. You lied to everyone. Jenna just texted me. She said you told them I didn't want you to come." "Well, you didn't." "Did you?" she snapped. "Not really. You just wanted us there to watch you show off." "Show off? Oh, Sadie, stop it," she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "We didn't want you getting ideas that you are better than everyone just because you got a piece of paper. You have always been like this, high and mighty, thinking you are too good for this town. We stayed here to celebrate your sister because she actually appreciates us. She doesn't look down on us." The words hung in the air between us. vibrating with a cruelty that felt ancient. We didn't want you getting ideas that you are better than everyone. That was it. That was the core of it. They hadn't missed my graduation because they were busy. They had missed it to humble me. They had missed it to remind me that no matter how far I climbed, I was still beneath them. "Put Dad on the phone," I said. My voice was shaking. "Sadie, he doesn't want to put him on." There was a shuffling sound, a muffled exchange of words. Then my father's voice came on the line. "Sadie," he said. He sounded tired. He always sounded tired. "Did you know?" I asked. "Did you know she was lying about the water heater?" He breathed out, a long, rattling exhale. "Honey, look, your mother. She wanted to make sure Chloe felt special today. You know how she gets. She gets these ideas in her head, and it is just easier to go along with it than to fight her." "Easier," I whispered. "We didn't mean to hurt you," he said, and I could hear the shrug in his voice. "We just thought, well, you are strong. Sadie, you handle things. Chloe needs us more. You left me alone. Dad." I sat there in an empty row. "I am sorry," he said, but it was the sorry of a man bumping into someone in a hallway, not a father breaking his daughter's heart. "Just let it go. Sadie, don't cause a scene. We will send you a card." He hung up. I stood in the middle of my living room, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. You know how she gets. I realized then that my father wasn't a hostage. He wasn't a victim of my mother's personality. He was her accomplice. He was the soft wall she threw me against so I wouldn't break entirely. Just enough to stay pliable. He traded my dignity for his peace and quiet. I threw the phone onto the couch. It bounced harmlessly. I needed to get out. The walls of the apartment were closing in. I felt like I was suffocating. I drove to the only place in the city that felt neutral, the Galaxy Diner on 4th Street. It was a 24-hour spot with vinyl booths that stuck to your legs and coffee that tasted like burnt hazelnuts. I texted Marin, "Diner, please." Marin was the only person in my life who knew the full extent of the rot in Briar Glen. We had met in a sophomore literature class 3 years ago. She was a paralegal who took night classes for fun, a sharp-eyed woman with a bob cut and a tolerance for nonsense that hovered around zero. She walked in 20 minutes after me. She didn't hug me. Marin wasn't a hugger. She slid into the booth opposite me, took one look at my face, and flagged down the waitress. 2 coffees, black, and a slice of the cherry pie, she said. She waited until the coffee arrived before she spoke. "Tell me," she said. I told her everything. I told her about the empty seats, the text messages, the plumbing lie, the Facebook photos, the call. I laid it all out like an autopsy, dissecting the day until there was nothing left but the raw, bloody facts. When I finished, I expected her to get angry. I expected her to rant, to call my mother names, to tell me I deserved better. That was what friends did. They hyped you up, but Marin didn't do that. She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes locked on mine over the rim of the mug. She set the cup down carefully. "Sadie," she said. Her voice was level, stripped of all pity. "Yeah," I sniffed, wiping my eyes with a paper napkin. "What would you do if you believed them?" I blinked. What would you do? Right now. If you finally believe them, if you stopped thinking this was a mistake, if you stopped thinking they were just chaotic or stressed or emotionally immature. What if you believed, fully and completely, that they showed you exactly who you are to them today? I stared at her. Who I am to them. "You are a resource. Sadie," Marin said, "you are a bank account. You are a punching bag they use to make themselves feel taller, and you are a scapegoat they use to bond with each other. That is the role. You have been auditioning for the role of beloved daughter for 30 years, but they are not casting for that part." I opened my mouth to argue, to say, "But they are my parents." But the words died in my throat. "If you believe that," Marin continued, leaning forward, "what would you do?" I looked down at the table. The formica was chipped at the edges. "If I believed that," I said slowly, "I would leave. I would stop trying to fix it." "Right," Marin said. "You would fire them. Fire them, you are the CEO of your own life. Sadie, they are bad employees. They are embezzling your happiness and stealing your wages. You would fire them. She reached across the table and tapped my hand. You have a degree now, she said. You have a job. Even if it's a grind. You have an apartment. You are not a child in Briar Glen anymore. You are a grown woman sitting in a diner in a city they are afraid to drive to. You have the power here. You just haven't realized it because you are still waiting for them to give you permission to be happy. They will never give it to you. I looked out the window at the dark street. A police car rolled by. Its lights silent. You are a resource. I thought about the $600. I thought about the text asking for it. The urgency. The manipulation. I need to check something. I said, standing up. Sit down. Marin said, finish your pie. Then go home and check. Do not do it here. You need to be calm. I went home. I sat at my desk. The same desk where I had studied for countless exams, and I opened my laptop. I didn't open my textbooks. I opened my life. I logged into my bank account first. I exported the data from the last 2 years into a spreadsheet. I started looking for patterns. I found the $600 immediately. But then I started looking at the smaller numbers, the ones that slip by when you are tired and overwhelmed. There was a recurring charge of $85 a month for a phone provider. Family plan bundle. I paid the bill. I had been paying the bill since I was 25, when my father lost his job at the plant, and they needed help for a few months. A few months had turned into 7 years. I logged into the provider's website. I had the password. I paid the bill. After all, I went to the usage logs. I saw my number. I saw my father's number. I saw my mother's number. And then I saw something that made my skin crawl. Under the Privacy Sharing tab, there was a setting checked Share Location and Activity Logs with Account Administrator. The account administrator was listed as my mother. I clicked on the activity logs. It showed a history of every number I had called and every number that had called me. It showed the duration. It showed the location of my phone based on tower pings. She wasn't just using me for the minutes. She was watching me. She knew who I talked to. She knew where I went. She knew I was at the diner tonight. I felt a wave of violations so intense it made me dizzy. You know how your mother gets. She tracked me. She tracked me so she could time her guilt trips. She tracked me so she knew when I was working late, when I was vulnerable. I went back to the bank statement. I looked at the miscellaneous column. There was an auto payment labeled TSF to account ending in 4409. It was small, $20 here, $50 there, sometimes 10. It was erratic, random dates. I didn't recognize the account number ending in 4409. I searched my email archives for 4409. Nothing. I searched my physical file box, the one under my bed where I kept my tax returns. I found an old folder from when I was 22. I had just moved out. I was drowning in credit card debt from a car repair, and my parents had offered to help me consolidate. We had gone to the local bank in Briar Glen together. I pulled out a carbon copy of a document, Joint Savings Account Agreement, signatories, Sadie E. Long, Eleanor Long. I had forgotten. God, I had forgotten. I thought we closed it when I paid off the debt. I had assumed it was closed, but the transfers were still happening. I looked at the dates of the transfers on my current statement. February 14th, $50. March 3rd, $25. April 10th, $40. They were siphoning money. Just small amounts. Amounts I wouldn't notice if I wasn't looking. Amounts that looked like service fees or gas station holds. They were stealing from me. My own mother was stealing from me. $20 at a time. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair, watching the sun come up over the city skyline. At 9 o'clock in the morning, I walked into the downtown branch of my bank. I looked horrible. My eyes were red. My hair pulled back in a severe bun, but I was wearing my business casual clothes. I needed to look like someone who mattered. I sat across from a banker named David. He was young, soft-spoken. I need to ask about a recurring transfer. I said, to an account ending in 4409. He tapped on his keyboard. He frowned. That is an internal transfer. Ms. Long, it is going to a joint savings account linked to your profile. Is it my account? I asked. Your name is on it. Yes, along with Eleanor Long. I see. I said. My voice was steady, robotic. And who initiated these transfers? He clicked a few more times. He turned the screen slightly so I couldn't see. A gesture of privacy that felt ironic. It looks like the transfers were initiated via telephone banking, using the verification credentials of the secondary account holder, my mother. She was calling the bank, pretending to be me or just using her status as a joint holder to pull money from my checking account into this joint account. Can I see the activity on the joint account? I asked. He hesitated. Technically, if your name is on it, yes. He printed a statement. He slid it across the desk. I looked at the withdrawals. The money came in from my checking account, and then, usually within 24 hours. It was withdrawn via ATM in Briar Glen, gas money, bingo money, liquor store runs. They were treating my paycheck like a petty cash drawer. I looked up at David. I want to close it. I can't close a joint account without both signatures, he said gently. Unless the balance is zero. What is the balance? $4.12. I took a $5 bill out of my wallet. I placed it on the desk. Deposit this, I said, then withdraw the total balance, and then remove my name from the account. He looked at me. He looked at the statement, then at the tears standing in my eyes that I refused to let fall. He saw the pattern. He saw the theft. He didn't ask why. He didn't tell me I should call my mother. He just nodded. You are not the first, he said softly. He typed for a long time. He stamped papers. He handed me a receipt. You are off the account, Ms. Long, and I have placed a block on your personal checking account for any transfers initiated by that other party. Thank you. I said. I walked out of the bank. The air outside was warm, smelling of asphalt and city exhaust. I didn't go to work. I called in sick. It was the first time in 4 years I had done so. I went back to my apartment. I took a shower, scrubbing my skin until it was pink, trying to wash off the feeling of Briar Glen. Then, I sat down at my kitchen table with a fresh notebook, a black composition book I had bought for a class I never took. I picked up a pen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't writing a to-do list for them. I wasn't writing a budget to accommodate their crises. I wrote 3 headings: what I own, what I owe, what I need. Under what I own, I wrote my car paid off, my degree, my savings minus $600, my silence. Under what I owe, I wrote student loans, rent, nothing to them. Under what I need, I wrote a new phone number, a new bank, a new address, to disappear. I stared at the last words, to disappear. It shouldn't have felt like a victory. It should have felt like a tragedy, running away from the people who gave me life. But as I looked at the words, I didn't feel grief. I felt a sudden, sharp intake of breath. I felt oxygen. I wasn't going to argue with them. I wasn't going to sue them for the stolen money. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a fight they could twist into a story about my instability. I was just going to vanish. I was going to become a ghost in their machine. I closed the notebook. The cover was cool under my hand. The revenge wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be a scene at a party or a dramatic letter. The revenge was going to be my absence. I stood up and went to the closet. I pulled out my suitcase. It was time to pack. I requested 2 days of personal leave from the marketing firm. It was the first time in 5 years I had taken time off for something that was not a family emergency, a funeral, or a frantic attempt to catch up on coursework. I told my boss I had administrative matters to attend to. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at the dark circles under my eyes that makeup could no longer conceal and signed the form. The morning of the first day, I woke up at 6 o'clock. I did not check my phone. I had turned it off the night before, silencing the digital noise that had been the soundtrack of my life. The silence in the apartment was absolute. It felt sterile, like a hospital room before the patient arrives. I dressed in jeans and a nondescript gray sweater. I drove 45 minutes north to a town called Larkhill. It was a dusty, forgotten place that sat on the edge of the commuter belt, just far enough away from Briar Glen to be irrelevant to my parents' social circle, but close enough for me to manage the logistics. I walked into the post office. It smelled of paper dust and adhesive. I rented a medium-sized box, paying in cash for 6 months up front. The clerk, a woman with reading glasses on a chain, pushed the key across the counter. "Is there a forwarding address you want to list?" she asked. "No," I said, "just this." I held the brass key in my palm. It was small, cold, and jagged. It was the first physical object I owned that my mother did not know about. It felt heavier than it looked. From there, I went to a bank I had never used before, a national chain with a reputation for impersonal efficiency. I sat in a glass-walled office and opened a checking account and a savings account. I declined the offer for paper statements. I want everything digital. I told the banker, and I want to set up two-factor authentication on a new phone number. I bought the phone next, a prepaid smartphone from an electronics store in a strip mall. I chose a number with a Larkhill area code. I stood in the parking lot and entered the new number into the bank's app when the confirmation code arrived. A simple 6-digit string. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of a door locking, not a trap door closing me in, but a fortress gate closing the world out. For the next 8 hours, I systematically dismantled the digital infrastructure of Sadie Long. I changed my email address to a generic Gmail account that contained no reference to my birth year or my hometown. I logged into every utility, every subscription, every government portal, and swapped the contact information. I removed my mother's name from the emergency contact fields at my doctor's office. I removed my father's name from my car insurance policy. I was methodical. I was ruthless. I treated my identity like a crime scene that needed to be scrubbed. By the time I returned to my apartment that evening, I was exhausted, but my hands were steady. I noticed it as I poured a glass of water. For years, my hands had possessed a subtle, high-frequency tremor, the somatic manifestation of walking on eggshells. Now, the glass was perfectly still. The next day, I focused on the paper. I drove to the university registrar's office. The campus was quiet, the post-graduation hangover still lingering in the air. I requested 3 certified copies of my transcript and my diploma. I am not sure where I will be living. I told the clerk, "Can I pick them up in person when they are ready?" She nodded and marked the file. "Hold for pickup." I went home and opened the small fireproof safe I had bought at a hardware store. It was heavy, black, and ugly. I placed my passport inside. I placed my birth certificate inside. I placed the new post office box key inside. I locked it. I spun the dial. I sat back on my heels and looked at the safe. It contained the sum total of my legal existence. It was small enough to carry, but heavy enough to anchor me. For the first time, my history wasn't scattered in drawers in my parents' house or accessible via a shared filing cabinet. It was mine. I thought I was being paranoid. I thought I was overreacting to a bad weekend. Then, on Thursday, I went back to work. I was in the break room, stirring creamer into my coffee, when a coworker named Beth walked in. Beth worked in the billing department for our firm, but she had grown up in a town 10 miles south of Briar Glen. She was the kind of woman who knew everyone's maiden name and credit score. "Sadie," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I have been meaning to ask you something. Is everything okay with your family?" I froze, the spoon clinking against the ceramic mug. "Why do you ask?" She leaned against the counter, checking the door to make sure we were alone. "My cousin works at the regional hardware supply in Briar Glen, the one your dad uses for his projects. She mentioned she saw your name on a delinquent account list this week." My stomach dropped. "My name?" "Yeah," Beth said. "She said it was for a line of credit opened last year. Small stuff, lumber, drywall, some power tools, but it is past due. Sadie, they are talking about sending it to collections. I told her it had to be a mistake because you are, well, you are you. You pay your bills." I stared at the brown liquid in my cup. A line of credit, lumber, drywall. I remembered my father building a new deck last summer. He had bragged about getting the materials at a discount. He hadn't mentioned that the discount was simply not paying for them, or putting the debt in his daughter's name because his own credit was shot. "It is a mistake," I said, my voice flat. "I will handle it." Beth looked at me with pity. "You know, Sadie, identity theft is a crime, even if it is family, especially if it is family." "I know," I said. I walked back to my desk. I didn't call the hardware store. I didn't call my father. I knew that if I paid it, I would be admitting it was mine. If I fought it, I would have to file a police report against my father. It wasn't a crime big enough to send him to jail. The local police in Briar Glen would laugh at a daughter pressing charges over $500 of lumber, but it was big enough to ruin me. It was big enough to keep my credit score tethered to their whims. It was a leash. I sat at my desk and realized that I couldn't just change my bank account. I had to change everything. That evening, I met Marin. She came to my apartment this time. She brought takeout containers of pad thai and a bottle of cheap wine. She also brought a business card. She slid the card across my coffee table. "Northline Strategies, West Marrow." "What is this?" I asked. "I have a friend from law school who moved to West Marrow." Marin said, opening a container of noodles. She knows a recruiter. They are looking for a communications specialist for a nonprofit consultancy. West Marrow. I looked at the card. West Marrow was 3 states away. It was a 12-hour drive. It was a different time zone. "It is far," Marin said, reading my mind. "That is the point. I can't move to West Marrow." "Marin, I have a lease. You have what?" Marin challenged, pointing her chopsticks at me. "You have a family that opens credit cards in your name. You have a mother who tracks your phone. You have a job here that pays you $10,000 less than market rate. I have you," I said quietly. Marin softened. She put the chopsticks down. "You will always have me, Sadie. But you can't have a life here. The soil is poisoned. You can't grow anything in Briar Glen or anywhere near it. You need to repot yourself." I looked at the card. "Northline Strategies. Just take the interview," she said. "It is remote for the first round. What do you have to lose?" I took the interview. I did it from my living room, wearing a blazer over my pajama bottoms. The hiring manager was a woman named Elena, with kind eyes and a direct manner. She asked me about my portfolio. She asked me about my writing style. She didn't ask me about my family. She didn't ask me why I looked so tired. When she described the role helping nonprofits tell their stories, crafting narratives for fundraising, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Competence. I knew how to do this. I knew how to shape a story. I had been shaping the story of my happy family for 30 years. I was an expert in fiction. At the end of the interview, Elena smiled. "We would like to fly you out for a final round next week," she said. I hesitated. The old reflex kicked in. The voice in my head that sounded like my mother whispered, "You can't leave. Who will help Dad with the tax software? Who will calm Mom down when the holidays get stressful? Who will be the villain?" Then I thought about the hardware store bill. I thought about the graduation seats. I would love that. I said. The silence from my end finally broke them. I hadn't responded to a text or a call in 8 days. I had blocked their numbers on my new phone, but I kept the old phone in a drawer, turned on, just to monitor the blast radius. I checked it on a Tuesday night. 14 missed calls, 22 texts. The tone had shifted. The first few days were casual check-ins. "Are you still pouting?" "Call your mother." Then, concern. "Are you sick?" "We are worried." Then, anger. I played a voicemail from my sister. "Chloe, Sadie," she said. Her voice was sharp, brittle. "This is ridiculous. Mom is crying. She thinks you are dead in a ditch somewhere. We called your work and they said you are on leave, so we know you are alive. If you are trying to punish us, congratulations. You win. You have made everyone miserable. I hope you are happy. You win." As if it were a game, as if my silence was a tactic to score points, rather than a desperate attempt to breathe. I didn't delete the voicemail. I saved it. It was evidence. 2 days later, the letter arrived. It came to my apartment address, the one I hadn't moved out of yet. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope. My mother's handwriting was unmistakable, looping, decorative, aggressive in its perfection. I sat on the floor and opened it with a letter opener. My dearest Sadie, I am writing this because you refuse to speak to the people who love you most. I do not know what lies you are telling yourself, but you need to hear the truth. What happened at graduation was unfortunate, but perhaps it was for your own good. You have been getting so wrapped up in this career idea, so focused on your own achievements, that you have lost sight of what matters. Pride ruins women. Sadie, it makes them hard. It makes them lonely. We stayed back to help your sister because she needed us. That is what family does. We sacrifice. I thought we raised you to understand that. But apparently, you think you are too special to sacrifice. You are throwing away your real family for, what, a job? A degree. Those things will not hold your hand when you are sick. We are the only ones who will ever truly know you. Come home on Sunday. We will make your favorite roast. We can put this ugliness behind us. But you need to apologize to your father. He is heartbroken. Love, Mom. I read the letter twice. Pride ruins women. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. She had taken her cruelty and repackaged it as a moral lesson. She had taken my success and framed it as a character flaw. You are throwing away your real family. I looked at the sentence. She was right. I was throwing it away. But it wasn't because of pride. It was because I had finally realized that real family didn't sabotage you. I folded the letter and put it in the shredder. I watched the cream-colored paper turn into confetti. The next morning, I went to the county courthouse. The building was a brutalist block of concrete downtown. I went to the clerk of courts, Division of Civil Records. I need the forms for a legal name change. I told the woman behind the glass partition. She didn't look up. She slid a clipboard under the gap. $40 filing fee. Cash or check. I took the clipboard to a plastic bench. Petition for change of name. Current name. Sadie Elizabeth Long. Proposed name. I stared at the blank line. I had thought about this for nights. I had rolled names around in my mouth like hard candies. I wanted something that sounded like it had always been mine. I didn't want a name that sounded like a fantasy character. I wanted a name that sounded like a woman who paid her taxes and slept through the night. I wrote Sadie Vance. Vance. It meant nothing to me, and that was why I loved it. It was a common surname. Sturdy, unpretentious. It was a wall. I filled out the rest of the form. Reason for change. I hesitated. I walked back to the window. The clerk was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. She looked at the form. She looked at the blank space next to reason. She looked at me. Really looked at me. She saw the tension in my shoulders, the way I was gripping the pen. Are you changing it for marriage? She asked. No. I said, divorce? No. She lowered her voice, leaning closer to the glass. Are you changing it for safety? The word hung in the air. Safety. I thought about the tracking on my phone. I thought about the credit line at the hardware store. I thought about the letter telling me that pride ruins women. I wasn't running from a husband with a gun. I wasn't running from a stalker in the bushes. But I was running for my life. I was running to save the part of me that was still capable of joy. Yes, I whispered, for safety. The clerk nodded. She didn't ask for a police report. She didn't ask for bruises. She just pointed to the line. Write personal reasons, she said gently. It keeps it cleaner in the public record. But once the judge signs this, the old name is dead. You understand that you can't go back and forth. I understand. I said, I don't want to go back. I wrote personal reasons. I paid the $40. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright, blinding sunshine. I felt lighter, physically lighter. I went to a park bench and pulled out a notebook. I opened a fresh page. I wrote Sadie Vance. I practiced the signature. The V was sharp, a checkmark of approval. The N's flowed smoothly. Sadie Vance. Sadie Long felt like a coat I had outgrown, tight in the shoulders and smelling of mothballs and old guilt. Sadie Vance felt like a clean shirt. 3 days later, I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, packing books into boxes, when my phone rang. It was the recruiter. Elena. Sadie, she asked. Do you have a moment? Yes, I said, standing up among the cardboard towers. We want to offer you the position, she said. The team loved you. We think your writing is exactly what we need. We want you in Westmarrow by the 1st of the month. She listed the salary. It was $20,000 more than I was making. She listed the relocation package. She listed the benefits. I listened to the numbers. They sounded like coordinates to a new planet. I accept, I said. My voice didn't shake. Wonderful. Elena said, we will send the offer letter over within the hour. Who should we address it to? I know you mentioned a pending legal change. Address it to Sadie Vance, I said. There was a pause, then a smile in her voice. Welcome to Northline. Sadie Vance. I hung up. I looked around the apartment. It was half empty. The walls were bare where I had taken down the few photos I owned. I didn't scream. I didn't pop a bottle of champagne. I didn't call Marin. Though I would tell her later, I just sat back down on the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest. A single tear leaked out. Hot and fast. Then another. I laughed. A short, wet sound. I was leaving. I was really leaving. I wasn't just moving towns. I was defecting. I was crossing a border they couldn't follow me across because they didn't have the paperwork for the woman I was becoming. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. They don't get to define me anymore. I whispered to the empty room. The words settled in the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. I was Sadie Vance, and I was gone. Westmarrow was not a city of charm. It was a city of steel, glass, and a bracing, persistent wind that swept off the northern lakes and scoured the streets clean. It was exactly what I needed. It was a place where history did not stick. I moved into a studio apartment on the 4th floor of a converted warehouse in the fictional district of Ironworks. The walls were exposed brick, painted a thick, industrial white. The floors were polished concrete. It was cold, echoing, and impersonal. When I locked the door behind me that first night, surrounded by cardboard boxes labeled in my own handwriting, I waited for the panic to set in. I waited for the crushing loneliness that my mother had predicted in her letter, the inevitable collapse of a woman who had tried to sever her roots, but the collapse did not come. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. It took me weeks to identify it. It was the absence of bracing. For 32 years, my body had been a clenched fist. I had lived in a state of perpetual anticipation, waiting for the next criticism, the next crisis, the next demand for money or emotional labor. I had walked through my life with my shoulders hunched, protecting my vital organs from a family that specialized in surgical strikes. Now, in the silence of Westmarrow, the fist began to unclench, and it hurt. It was a grief of peace, my nervous system, addicted to the cortisol of Briar Glen, did not know what to do with safety. I would wake up at 3 a.m, heart hammering, convinced I had missed a call or forgotten a bill. I would check my phone, but the screen was dark. There were no emergency texts from Chloe, no passive-aggressive voicemails from my mother. Just the time, glowing softly in the dark. I was Sadie Vance now. The name was on my lease. It was on my driver's license, which I had obtained at the Department of Motor Vehicles on my second day in the city. It was on the employee badge that clipped to my waistband. I started my job at Northline Strategies on a Monday. The office was an open-plan space filled with natural light and the low hum of productivity. I was assigned a desk near a window that overlooked the gray water of the river. My boss, Elena, was a woman who spoke in complete paragraphs and expected you to do the same. She did not ask about my family. She did not ask where I was from. She asked me to draft a donor impact report for a literacy nonprofit. I worked with a ferocity that surprised even me. In Briar Glen, my competence had always been viewed with suspicion, as if my ability to handle things was an indictment of my family's inability to do so. Here, it was currency. 3 months in. Elena stopped by my desk. "This is excellent work." "Sadie," she said, tapping a printout of a speech I had written for a gala. "You captured the voice perfectly. You have a talent for invisible narration. Thank you, I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. I mean it, she said. You write like someone who knows how to listen to what isn't being said. I didn't tell her that I had spent 3 decades listening to silence, parsing the difference between a silent treatment that meant I am sad and a silent treatment that meant I am going to destroy you. I just nodded and said, I enjoy the work. Nobody at Northline knew about the empty seats at graduation. Nobody knew about the chocolate fountain or the stolen deposit. To them, I was just Sadie Vance, the quiet, efficient communications specialist who arrived early, left late, and never joined the office gossip about weekend plans. I built a routine. It was a scaffolding to hold my new life upright. I woke up at 5:30 every morning. I walked along the river path, watching the sun struggle through the industrial smog. The cold air felt like a baptism. I found a therapist. Her name was Dr. Eris, and her office was a small, beige room that smelled of lavender and old paper. I sat on her couch during our first session and laid it out. I didn't cry. I treated it like a debriefing. I told her about the name change, the move, the graduation. She listened, her face unreadable. I am paying for this myself, I told her. Abruptly, I assumed you were. She said, No, I need you to know. My parents don't know I am here. They don't have access to the bill. This is mine. Why is that important to you? Sadie, she asked, because if they paid for it, they would own the breakthrough. I said, and I can't let them own my mind anymore. I made friends, but I was careful. I was like a gardener planting in rocky soil. I tested the ground before I put down roots. There was a woman named Sarah in accounting who liked to hike. There was a guy named Mark in IT who liked obscure foreign films. I went to coffee with them. I went to the cinema. But when they asked about my holidays, or my parents, I offered a polished, impenetrable surface. We are not close, I would say, with a small, sad smile that discouraged follow-up questions. They live in a small town, and we just drifted apart. I didn't tell them about the theft. I didn't tell them about the emotional arson. I learned that people from happy families didn't understand. They would try to fix it. They would say things like, but she is your mother, or family is everything. I couldn't survive those platitudes, so I lied by omission. A year passed, then another. The seasons in Westmarrow turned with a brutal predictability. Snow, mud, humidity, wind. I bought a winter coat that cost $400, paying for it in cash. I bought a used Honda with my own financing. I started to feel real. The phantom limb sensation of my old life began to fade. But Briar Glen was not a place that let go easily. The messages started coming through the cracks in the dam I had built. My mother couldn't contact me directly. I had changed my number, my email, and my social media presence was non-existent, so she used the extended network. It started with a LinkedIn request from a second cousin I hadn't seen since I was 12, then a Facebook message to Marin, asking her to please tell Sadie to call home. Her mother is worried sick. Marin, bless her, never passed the messages on directly. She would just tell me on our weekly calls. She is escalating. Marin said one Tuesday evening, she has started telling Aunt Linda that you joined a cult. A cult, I laughed, stirring pasta in my kitchenette. Yeah, apparently, that is the only explanation for why a nice girl would cut off her loving family. You are being influenced. You are unstable. She told the church prayer group that she thinks you are having a mental breakdown and that is why you ran away. She is rewriting the narrative. I said, if I am crazy, then she doesn't have to be guilty. Exactly. Marin said, but Sadie, just be careful. She's running out of supply. She's going to try to provoke a reaction. The provocation came 2 weeks later. I opened my work email on a Tuesday morning. There, in my inbox, buried between a calendar invite and a newsletter, was an email from an address I didn't recognize. Frank L. 55 at provider.net. My father. I stared at the screen. How did he get this address? Northline Strategies listed their employees on the website. But not their direct emails. He must have guessed. Or he must have called the front desk and charmed the receptionist. The subject line was blank. I debated deleting it. My hand hovered over the mouse, but the old curiosity, the child in me who still wanted to be seen, won out. I clicked it. Sadie, your mom won't stop until you come back. That was it. No greeting. No, I miss you. No, I am sorry we missed your graduation. No, I am sorry we stole your money. Just a statement of fact. Your mom won't stop. I read it again. And then I read it a third time. In the past, I would have read this as a warning, a protective gesture from a father trying to shield his daughter. But now, with the distance of 2 years and 3 states, I saw it for what it was. It was a confession of cowardice. He wasn't telling me to stay away to save me. He was telling me to come back to save him. He was tired of dealing with her. He was tired of being the only target in the house. He wanted me to return and take my place as the lightning rod so he could go back to being the quiet, long-suffering husband in the background. Your mom won't stop. I didn't reply. I printed the email, folded it, and put it in my safe at home. Then I blocked the address. But the email was just the first tug on the line. A month later, I received a call at work. This is Northline Strategies. Sadie Vance speaking. Ms. Vance. This is unexpected. I'm looking for a Sadie Long. My heart hammered against my ribs. The name sounded like a gunshot in the quiet office. Who is calling? I asked, keeping my voice steady. This is Greg from Briar Glen Medical Supply. I have you listed here as the emergency contact and financial guarantor for a rental account. I closed my eyes. A rental account? I am not Sadie Long. I said automatically. Well, the social security number matches the one we have on file, Greg said, sounding irritated. Look, we have been trying to reach the primary account holder, Chloe Miller, for 3 months. The account is for a specialized wheelchair rental for a Mr. Frank Long. My father. He needs a wheelchair, I asked. The slip happening before I could stop it. He had back surgery 4 months ago. Greg said, Look, the bill is $1,800. It is 90 days past due. If we don't get payment, we are going to have to send this to collections. And since you are listed as the guarantor, I didn't sign anything. I said, my voice rising. I haven't lived in Briar Glen for 2 years. I never agreed to be a guarantor. I have a signature right here, Greg said. It is dated 6 months ago. They had forged my signature. My sister, or my mother, had rented a wheelchair for my father, and instead of paying for it, they had put my name down. They had used my old identity, the one they thought I had abandoned, to absorb the debt. Send me a copy of the contract, I told Greg, and do not call this number again. This is a place of business. I hung up. My hands were shaking. They weren't just rewriting the past. They were cannibalizing my future. They were racking up debt in the name of a ghost, banking on the fact that I wouldn't prosecute my own family. I left work early. I couldn't focus. The peace I had cultivated felt thin, like ice over a deep, dark river. I needed professional help, not a therapist, a shark. I found an attorney in West Marrow named Elias Kael. He specialized in identity theft and family law. His office was in a strip mall, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a vape shop, but his reviews were stellar. I sat in his office the next day and laid out the documents, the hardware store debt from 2 years ago, the wheelchair contract Greg had emailed me, the joint account history. I changed my name. I said, I thought that would stop it. Changing your name doesn't erase your social security number. Mr. Kael said. He was a small man with sharp eyes and a tie that was too wide for his frame. They are using your PII, personally identifiable information, to act as a credit buffer. It is common in complicated family dynamics. It is fraud. I said, it is. He agreed, and we can stop it. But we have to be aggressive. We have to file police reports in Briar Glen. We have to notify the credit bureaus. We have to flag your file for fraud so that nobody, not even you, can open a line of credit without a PIN number and a blood sample. Practically. Do it. I said. He nodded. I will start the background check today. I want to see if there is anything else attached to your social that you don't know about. He called me 3 days later. Sadie, can you come in? He asked. His voice was different, heavier. I went to his office on my lunch break. He had a file open on his desk. I ran a comprehensive asset and liability search. He said, "Most of it is what you expected. The wheelchair debt, the hardware store, a few small utility bills. But I found something else." He slid a document across the desk. It looked old. The header was from a law firm in Briar Glen that I knew had closed down 10 years ago. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a trust document," Kyle said. "It was filed 12 years ago." "A trust," I frowned. "My family doesn't have trusts. My parents live paycheck to paycheck. This is the Eleanor and Frank Long Family Trust." Kyle read, "It is dormant. It has been sitting there for a decade. But here is the interesting part." He pointed to a paragraph on the second page. Contingent beneficiary, Sadie Elizabeth Long. Primary beneficiary, Chloe Marie Long. I stared at the names. "I don't understand." I said, "What is in the trust?" "That is the question," Kyle said. "It is funded. There is an asset inside it. But because the law firm dissolved and the trust is private, I can't see the value or the nature of the asset without a court order, but the structure is unusual. Unusual how it is set up to bypass probate," Kyle explained. "But it is also set up with a triggering clause. The primary beneficiary, your sister, receives access to the principal upon the death of the grantors, or what? Or upon the disqualification of the contingent beneficiary. Disqualification. Usually, that means death," Kyle said. "Or sometimes, legal estrangement. If you are removed, your sister gets everything immediately, even before your parents die, depending on how the specific clause is written." I sat back in the chair. 12 years ago, I was 20. That was the year my grandmother died. My mother's mother. She wasn't rich, but she had a house, a nice house on the river. My mother had told me there was no inheritance. She said the nursing home took everything. But if there was a trust, they hid it. I whispered, "They hid an asset. It looks like it," Kyle said. "And if they are racking up debt in your name while sitting on a trust fund for your sister, well, that changes the intent from survival to malice." I walked out of his office into the gray afternoon. The temptation of vindication hit me like a physical blow. For years, I had thought I was crazy. I had thought I was imagining the disparity in how they treated us. I thought I was just being sensitive when I noticed Chloe got the new clothes and I got the hand-me-downs, or that Chloe got the car and I got the bus pass. But if there was a trust, if there was actual, legal proof that they had valued her over me on paper, 12 years ago, it would prove everything. It would prove I wasn't unlovable. I was just robbed. I went to therapy that evening. I was vibrating with energy. "I want to sue them." I told Dr. Aris, "I want to open that trust. I want to drag it into the light. I want to see their faces when I prove they have been lying for a decade, Doctor." Aris watched me. She let me rant for 10 minutes. She let me describe the courtroom scene in my head, the moment of ultimate victory. And then she asked the question that stopped me cold. And then what she asked? "What do you mean?" "And then what?" I snapped. "Then I win." "Okay," she said calmly. "You win. You expose them. You get a judgment. Maybe you get some money. Maybe you don't. But you will have to talk to them. You will have to go back to Briar Glen. You will have to sit in a deposition room with your mother and listen to her cry and lie and twist the story until you feel like you are losing your mind again." I stayed silent. "Sadie," she said softly, "you have spent 2 years building a life of peace. You have a job you love. You have a home. You have a name that feels clean." She leaned forward. "What do you want your life to be? Do you want it to be a lawsuit, or do you want it to be yours?" I looked at my hands. They were steady, but the rage inside me was making them want to form fists again. "I want them to hurt," I whispered, "like they hurt me." "That is natural," she said, "but the only way to hurt them is to engage with them, and the moment you engage, they have you back in the system, the trust, the debts, the guilt. It is all bait. They are fishing for you. Sadie, do you want a bite? I went home that night and didn't sleep. I sat by the window, looking at the city lights of West Marrow. What do you want your life to be? I wanted to be free, but I also wanted the truth. I was torn between the clean, cold air of my new life and the hot, sticky pull of the old one. The answer arrived 3 days later, on a Friday evening. I checked my mailbox in the lobby of the warehouse building. There was a padded envelope inside. It had no return address. The postmark was smudged, but I could make out the state abbreviation. It wasn't from Briar Glen. It was mailed from a distribution center 2 towns over from West Marrow. Someone had been here, or someone had hired someone to be here. I took the elevator up to my apartment. I put the envelope on the kitchen island. My hands were shaking. I had to use scissors to cut the tape. I reached inside. I pulled out a booklet. It was made of heavy cardstock. University Commencement, Class of 2022. It was my graduation program. I recognized the design. I had seen it online, but I had never held one. This copy was damaged. There was a brown ring on the cover, a coffee stain that had soaked through the first few pages. The corners were bent, as if it had been carried in a back pocket or shoved into the bottom of a purse. I opened it. I flipped to the section for the College of Communications. I ran my finger down the list of names: Little, Sarah, Livingston, James, Locke, Gregory, and there, between Locke and Lopez, was a black line. Someone had taken a thick permanent marker and struck through my name, Sadie Elizabeth Long. It was crossed out with such force that the paper was torn slightly where the pen had dug in. I turned the program over. On the back cover, there was a handwritten note. The handwriting was jagged, unfamiliar. It wasn't my mother's loops. It wasn't my father's scrawl. It wasn't Chloe's bubbly print. It was sharp, angular, and hurried. You weren't forgotten. You were erased. I stared at the words. You were erased. The air in the apartment seemed to drop 10 degrees. This wasn't just a taunt. This was a message from someone who knew what had happened that day. Someone who knew that I hadn't just been left behind, I had been actively removed from the narrative. I looked at the coffee stain. I looked at the black line, and I realized Dr. Aris was wrong. This wasn't about bait. This wasn't about them fishing for me. This was about something much darker. I wasn't dealing with a dysfunctional family who missed a graduation because they were selfish. I was dealing with a family who had crossed out my name long before I ever walked across that stage. I touched the black ink. If I was erased, then I had nothing left to lose. I picked up my phone. I dialed Elias Kael's office. Even though it was 8 o'clock at night, it went to voicemail. Elias, I said into the phone, my voice cold and clear. It is Sadie. File the fraud reports, file the police reports, and get the court order for the trust. I looked at the graduation program one last time. I am not biting the bait, I whispered to the empty room. I am coming for the fisherman. The postmark on the padded envelope was not a mystery. It was a smudge of black ink that read North District Distribution Center, zip code 49002. It was a zip code that belonged to a cluster of commuter towns 20 miles east of West Marrow. It was close, too close. It meant that whoever sent the graduation program had been within driving distance of my apartment, of my job, of the grocery store where I bought my apples on Tuesday evenings. I spent 2 nights staring at the envelope. I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen island with a laptop and a pot of coffee that turned progressively more bitter as the hours ticked by. I treated the envelope like an artifact from a crime scene. I held it up to the light. I ran my fingers over the jagged handwriting on the back. You weren't forgotten. You were erased. The handwriting was not my mother's. It was not my father's. But there was something about the slant of the T's, the aggressive cross of the A's, that triggered a dormant synapse in my brain. It was the handwriting of someone who wrote quickly, someone who was used to taking dictation. I started searching. I cross-referenced recent property sales in the 49002 zip code with names from Briar Glen. It was a tedious, needle-in-a-haystack search, the kind of data mining I usually performed for donor prospect lists at Northline. At 3 o'clock in the morning on the second day, I found a match, Tanya Rourke. The name hit me like a splash of cold water. Tanya had been our neighbor in Briar Glen for 5 years. She lived in the yellow split level across the street. She was a quiet woman, a widow who kept her blinds drawn and her lawn manicured to within an inch of its life. But more importantly, she had worked as a part-time administrative assistant for my mother's consulting business, a vague enterprise that mostly involved planning church fundraisers and managing the homeowners association. Tanya had moved away 2 years ago. I remembered seeing the moving truck the same week I was studying for my final exams. I looked at the address listed on the property deed. It was in a town called Oakhaven, right in the center of the 49002 zip code. I did not call. I did not send a letter. I drove. It was a Sunday afternoon. The sky was a flat, slate gray, threatening snow. I drove my paid-off Honda into the driveway of a small, neat bungalow that looked exactly like the one she had left in Briar Glen, just transported 3 states away. I knocked on the door. My hands were in my pockets, fists clenched tight against the cold. The door opened. Tanya stood there. She looked older, her hair pulled back in a severe gray bun, wearing a cardigan that seemed 2 sizes too big. She saw me. Her eyes widened, but she did not look surprised. She looked resigned. "Hello?" "Sadie," she said. Her voice was dry, like leaves scraping together. "You sent it." I said. It was not a question. She stepped back and held the door open. "Come in. It is freezing out there." Her living room smelled of cinnamon and stale cigarette smoke. There were boxes stacked in the corner, still unpacked. She gestured for me to sit on a floral sofa that I recognized from her old house. I sat on the edge of the cushion. Why, I asked. Why now Tanya sat in a rocking chair opposite me? She picked up a pack of cigarettes, pulled one out, but did not light it. She just rolled it between her fingers. "I worked for your mother for 4 years, Tanya said. "You know that. I did her filing. I managed her calendar. I sent out the Christmas cards." I nodded. "I quit the week after your graduation," she said. "I moved here to be closer to my sister. But I took some things with me. I took them because things got weird. Sadie, really weird. Weird how your mother," Tanya said, looking at the unlit cigarette. "She treats people like chess pieces, but not in a clever way, in a brute force way. If a piece doesn't move where she wants it, she breaks it." She stood up and walked to a sideboard. She opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. It was thick. "I saw the pictures of the graduation party on Facebook," Tanya said. "I saw what she posted, and I knew you weren't there. I knew why you weren't there." She handed me the folder. "I printed these before I wiped the computer." She said, "I don't know why I kept them. Guilt, maybe. Or maybe I just knew that one day you would need to know that you weren't crazy." I opened the folder. It was a stack of emails, printed copies of correspondence from my mother's account. I read the first one. It was dated 4 months before my graduation. "To Riverview Event Center. From Eleanor Long. Subject booking inquiry. We need the Magnolia Room for May 24th. I know that is the same weekend as the university commencement, but please do not worry about conflicts. My daughter Sadie will not be attending her ceremony. She finds those things tedious. We want to focus the weekend entirely on Chloe's promotion. Please ensure the deposit invoice is sent to my attention only." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. She had planned it, 4 months in advance. She hadn't just forgotten. She had preemptively canceled my achievement to clear the runway for Chloe. I turned the page. To Aunt Linda. From Eleanor Long. Subject graduation weekend. "Linda, honey, just a heads up. Sadie is in a bit of a mood about finishing school. She feels embarrassed that it took her so long, so she has asked us to keep it very low profile. She specifically asked that nobody make a fuss or try to drive up. It is best if we just respect her wishes and focus on Chloe's party. You know how sensitive Sadie gets about her failures." My failures? My magna cum laude degree was a failure. I turned the page. This one was to my father. To Frank Long. From Eleanor Long. Subject phones. "Frank, I need you to keep your phone off on Friday morning. If she calls you, you will just get emotional and try to fix it. We are doing this for her own good. She needs to learn that the world does not stop just because she got a diploma. If you answer, you are undermining me. Do not make me the bad guy here. Just turn it off and say the battery died. I lowered the paper. My hands were trembling. She had orchestrated the silence. She had scripted my father's negligence. She is sick, I whispered. Tanya lit the cigarette then, the flame flaring bright in the dim room. She is not sick, Tanya said, exhaling a plume of smoke. Sick implies she can't help it. She is just hungry. She is hungry for control. And you were the only thing she couldn't swallow. I looked at Tanya. Why did you send me the program? Because I found it in her trash, Tanya said. She had it. You sent her the tickets and the program, right? She threw them in the recycling bin the day they arrived. I fished it out. I kept it. I thought you should know that you weren't just forgotten. Sadie, you were targeted. I drove back to West Marrow in a daze. The emails sat on the passenger seat like a radioactive isotope. I went straight to my apartment and called Elias Kael. I need to see you. I said, it was Sunday night. But Elias met me at his office. He read the emails. His face, usually animated with the cynical energy of a lawyer who had seen everything, went still. This establishes malice, he said quietly. This isn't just negligence. This is a tortious interference with, well, with your life. There is more. I said. I told him about the auto payment leak I had found in my old bank records during my initial audit 2 years ago. The small, recurring charges I had assumed were just more theft. I looked into it again last night. I said, the merchant is Briar Glen Self-Storage. Elias frowned. You have a storage unit, no? I said, I have never rented a storage unit, but the payments are coming from an account linked to my name, and if the unit is in my name, you are liable for what is inside. Elias finished. And if they are putting debt in my name, I said, who knows what they are putting in a storage unit in my name? We need to close it. Elias said, we need to terminate the lease and secure the contents. I can't do that from here. Can I? No, Elias said. You have to sign the vacating order in person, and you have to physically remove the items. I looked at the window. Outside, the wind was howling through the steel canyons of West Marrow. I have to go back, I said. Elias nodded. You have to go back. We planned the trip like a military extraction. I took a personal day on a Wednesday, the middle of the week, the middle of the morning, the time when Briar Glen was most asleep. I rented a car, a silver sedan that blended into the asphalt. I didn't want my Honda with its West Marrow plates sitting in the parking lot. I told no one except Marin. I am going in. I texted her. Be safe, she replied. Do not engage. Get in. Get out. I drove the 3 hours south. As the landscape changed from the industrial gray of West Marrow to the rolling green hills of the river valley, my stomach began to knot. I passed the sign, Welcome to Briar Glen, a good place to grow. I put on my sunglasses. I pulled the visor down. The town looked exactly the same. The same cracked sidewalks, the same faded awnings on Main Street, the same oppressive sense of familiarity that felt like a hand closing around my throat. I felt surreal. I was a ghost haunting my own history. I saw the grocery store where I had worked in high school. I saw the library where I had hidden from my mother on Saturday afternoons. I drove straight to the storage facility. It was a row of corrugated metal sheds on the edge of town, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. I parked the rental car around the back, out of sight of the main road. I walked into the office. The bell above the door chimed. The manager was sitting behind a high counter, reading a fishing magazine. He was a heavy-set man with a white beard. Mr. Henderson, I remembered him. He used to coach my softball team in 3rd grade. I kept my sunglasses on. I need to access Unit 404, I said, and I need to close the account. Name, he asked. Not looking up. Sadie Vance. I said. I slid the legal change of name document across the counter along with my new ID. He looked at the ID. He looked at the name. Then he looked at me. He squinted. Sadie, he asked. Sadie Long. My heart hammered. Sadie Vance, I corrected. He chuckled. A wet, wheezing sound. Well, I will be damned. Your mom said you went off and got married or something. Changed your name. I didn't believe her. I stayed silent. She was just here. You know, he said, tapping the computer keys. Last month. My blood ran cold. Here I asked. Yeah. She came in to pay the late fee. Said you were having trouble with your new bank or something. She is a saint. That woman, always cleaning up your messes. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. Cleaning up my messes. She was the one who made the mess. She was the one renting the unit in my name. Just close it. Mr. Henderson. I said, I am emptying it today. He printed a receipt. You need the code, I have it. I lied. I walked out into the sunlight. The air felt thin. She was just here. She knew I would come. She knew the auto payment would eventually flag, or the late fee notices would find me. She was maintaining the trap. I walked to Unit 404. I used the master key code Elias had subpoenaed from the corporate office, a legal maneuver that had cost me $500 but saved me from asking Mr. Henderson for help. The roll-up door rattled as I lifted it. It screamed against the metal tracks, a sound that echoed across the empty lot. Sunlight flooded the concrete floor. I stepped inside. The unit was full. There were boxes stacked to the ceiling, plastic tubs, garbage bags. I walked to the nearest box. It was labeled in my mother's distinctive, looping handwriting. Sadie's room. Trash. I opened it. It wasn't trash. It was my life. There was the debate trophy I had won in 11th grade, the one she told me had gotten lost during the attic renovation. There was my favorite sweater from college, the blue cashmere one I thought I had left at a laundromat. There was a stack of letters tied with a ribbon, letters I had written to my grandmother when I was 16, pouring out my heart about how lonely I felt. I thought I had mailed them. My mother had intercepted them. She had kept everything. She hadn't thrown it away. She had archived it. She had built a museum of my vulnerability in a metal box on the edge of town. I moved deeper into the unit. There was a filing cabinet in the back, a gray metal one. I pulled open the top drawer. Files, dozens of them. Sadie, medical, Sadie, taxes, Sadie, trust. I pulled the trust file. I opened it. There were the documents Elias had found, the Eleanor and Frank Long family trust. But there was more. There were bank statements. First National Bank of Briar Glen, account holder Sadie Long, opened 2018. Community Credit Union, account holder Sadie Long, opened 2020. She had opened accounts in my name, multiple accounts. I flipped through the statements, deposits, withdrawals. They were moving money, large sums, $10,000 here, $15,000 there. It wasn't just petty theft, it was laundering. They were using my identity to cycle money through the trust and into their own pockets, keeping their own names clean for tax purposes. I felt sick. I sank down onto a plastic tub. This wasn't just a toxic family. This was a criminal enterprise, and I was the shell company. I heard gravel crunch behind me. I froze. I turned around slowly. Standing in the open doorway of the storage unit, backlit by the harsh morning sun, was a silhouette. It wasn't my mother. It was my father. He was wearing his old work jacket, the canvas stained with oil. He looked smaller than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped. His hair was completely white. He didn't look angry. He looked terrified. "Dad," I whispered. He didn't step inside. He stayed on the threshold, as if the concrete floor was lava. "She told me you would come," he said. His voice was a rasp. "You knew I asked." Gesturing to the boxes, "You knew about all of this." He looked at the filing cabinet. He looked at the floor. "She said you always come back," he said. "She said you can't stay away. She said you need us to manage you. Manage me." I stood up. I held up the trust file. Is this managing me? Laundering money through my name, stealing my identity. "Sadie, please," he said, raising a hand. "It is not like that. It is complicated. The business. We had some trouble. We needed a place to put some assets for a while, just until things blew over. You used me as a shield." I said, You put me in the line of fire. We knew you wouldn't get in trouble, he said, pleading. You are smart. Sadie, you always figure it out. We knew if anyone asked, you could explain it. You have always been the strong one. The strong one. The words twisted in my gut. They didn't admire my strength. They exploited it. They banked on my resilience the same way they banked on my credit score. Why are you here? Dad. I asked. He looked over his shoulder at the parking lot. She sent me, he said. She got the alert. The alert, mister. Henderson called her. He said, as soon as you walked in, she is on her way. Sadie, she is coming. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. You need to go, he said. What? Take the papers, he said. Take the box, and go. Before she gets here, why are you helping me? He looked at his hands. They were shaking. Because I am tired. Sadie, he whispered, I am so tired. And she said, if you came back, we were going to make you sign the renewal on the loan. She has the papers in the car. He looked up at me. Run, he said. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the trust file. I grabbed the file labeled accounts. I grabbed the packet of letters to my grandmother. I didn't take the trophy. I didn't take the sweater. I left the keepsakes. They were just bait. I ran past my father. I could smell the stale tobacco and sawdust on his jacket. I didn't hug him. I didn't say goodbye. I threw the files into the passenger seat of the rental car. I slammed the door. I started the engine. As I peeled out of the lot, gravel spraying against the metal fence, I saw a car turning in from the main road. It was a black SUV. My mother's car. I didn't slow down. I drove straight at the exit. She saw me. I saw her face through the windshield. Her mouth was open in a shout I couldn't hear. She swerved to block the exit, but I was faster. I jumped the curb, the rental car bottoming out with a sickening scrape, and shot out onto the road. I didn't look back. I drove. I drove until my hands went numb on the wheel. I drove until the sign for Briar Glen was a distant memory in the rearview mirror. I didn't stop until I was across the state line. I pulled into a rest stop. I turned off the engine. The silence of the car was deafening. I looked at the files on the seat next to me. I had the proof. I had the smoking gun. But as I sat there, watching the trucks rumble by on the highway, I realized something terrifying. My father was right. She said you always come back. And I had. I had come back. I had walked right into the trap. The real trap wasn't emotional. It wasn't about love or guilt or the desire for closure. It was administrative. As long as my name was on those papers, as long as my social security number was in her filing cabinet, I was tethered to her. I could change my name to Sadie Vance. I could move to the moon, but Sadie Long was still in that storage unit. Sadie Long was still the account holder. Sadie Long was the hostage. I picked up the trust document. If I wanted to be free, I couldn't just run. I couldn't just hide. I had to kill Sadie Long. I had to dismantle her, document by document, account by account, until there was nothing left for them to grab onto. I took out my phone. I called Elias. I got them. I said, "Good." He said, "Come straight to my office." "Elias," I said, "I am not just filing a fraud report. What are you doing? I am pressing charges." I said, "I am burning it down." I hung up. I put the car in gear. I wasn't running anymore. I was going to war. The cafe was located off exit 44, a nondescript building with beige siding and a sign that simply read, "Coffee Diner." It was the kind of place that existed in the liminal space between destinations, a spot where truckers stopped for pie and families stopped to use the restroom. It was neutral ground. It was nowhere. I arrived 30 minutes early. I sat in a booth near the back, facing the door. My lawyer, Elias, had advised me not to go alone, but I had refused his offer to accompany me. This wasn't a deposition. This was an amputation, and I needed to hold the knife myself. On the table in front of me sat a thick manila folder. Inside were the documents Elias and I had prepared over the last 48 hours, the fraud alerts, The disclaimer of liability for the storage unit, the formal notification to the Social Security Administration. I ordered a black coffee and watched the steam curl into the air. My hands were steady. 2 years ago, the thought of confronting my father would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety. I would have rehearsed my apologies. I would have wondered what I had done wrong. But I wasn't Sadie Long anymore. I was Sadie Vance, and Sadie Vance didn't apologize for being robbed. At 10 o'clock exactly, my father's truck pulled into the lot. He walked in slowly, the bell above the door chiming with a cheerful sound that felt obscene given the circumstances. He looked older than he had in the storage unit parking lot just days ago. He wore a button-down shirt that was pressed but frayed at the cuffs. He looked like a man who had been shrinking for a long time. He saw me and hesitated. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just nodded at the empty seat opposite me. He sat down. He didn't take off his coat. "You look good." "Sadie," he said. His voice was rough. "You look professional." "I am professional, Dad," I said. "I work for a consultancy firm. I make my own money. I pay my own bills." He winced at the emphasis. The waitress came over, poured him a cup of coffee, and left. We were the only 2 people in the back section. "Did you bring it?" I asked. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim file. He slid it across the table. "It is the original trust deed," he said, "and the surrender forms for the life insurance policy we took out on you when you were 18. I opened the file. I scanned the dates. They had insured me like an asset. If I died, they got $200,000. If I lived, they borrowed against the cash value. Why, I asked. I looked him in the eye. I don't want the lie. Dad, I don't want the "we were struggling" speech. I want to know why it was me. Why not Chloe? Why not you? Why was I the one you decided to eat alive? He looked down at his coffee cup. He traced the rim with a shaking finger. "Because you were the quiet one," he said softly. I stared at him. "The quiet one. Chloe is loud," he continued. "Since she was a baby, if she didn't get what she wanted, she screamed, she threw things, she made life unbearable. Your mother, she couldn't handle the noise. She would give Chloe whatever she wanted just to make the screaming stop. And I didn't scream. I said, 'No.' He said, 'You didn't. You cried in your room. You wrote in your journals. You tried harder. When we asked you to sign something, you signed it because you wanted to help. You wanted to be good.'" He looked up, and his eyes were wet. "You were the quiet solution. Sadie, we used you because you wouldn't cause a scene. We knew we could put the debt on you, or the responsibility on you, and you would just absorb it. You would work an extra shift. You would fix it. We called you the fixer behind your back." I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't anger. It was the absolute zero of realization. I wasn't loved for my goodness. I was exploited for my compliance. My virtue was their liquidity. "So the graduation," I said, "the sabotage." "Chloe was jealous," he admitted. "She was stuck in that assistant manager job. You were getting a degree. You were leaving. Your mother couldn't handle Chloe being upset. So she leveled the playing field. She needed to take you down a peg so Chloe wouldn't feel small. Leveled the playing field," I repeated, "by erasing me." He nodded. "I am sorry. Sadie, I am so sorry. I tried to tell her it was too much, but you turned off your phone. I said, 'You let me sit in that chair alone.' I was afraid," he whispered. The bell above the door chimed again. My father flinched. He looked at the entrance, and his face drained of color. "No," he breathed. "No, I didn't tell her." I turned around. My mother was walking into the diner. She didn't look like a woman who had been caught laundering money. She didn't look like a monster. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a beige trench coat and a silk scarf. Her hair was perfectly coiffed. She was smiling, a tight, pleasant expression that didn't reach her eyes. She walked straight to our booth. She didn't look at my father. She looked at me. "Sadie," she said. Her voice was warm, the tone she used for company. "You are looking thin. Are you eating enough?" She slid into the booth next to my father, trapping him against the wall. She placed her purse on the table. right on top of the insurance documents he had given me. "Mom," I said, "I didn't invite you." "Well, families don't need invitations," she said, flagging down the waitress. "Just a water with lemon, please." She turned back to me, clasping her hands. "Your father told me he was meeting you. He thought he could sneak away. But you know he's terrible at keeping secrets from me. I thought I would come along. We have so much to discuss." "We have nothing to discuss." I said, "I am here to close the accounts. Mom, I am here to end it." "End what?" she asked, tilting her head. "This little tantrum, Sadie. Honestly, you have been gone for 2 years. You have made your point. You proved you can be independent. Congratulations. Now come home. We have a pile of paperwork at the house that needs sorting, and your sister is overwhelmed." I looked at her. She really believed it. She believed that reality was whatever she said it was. She believed that if she acted like everything was normal, I would fall back into line. "I am not coming home," I said, "and I am not sorting your paperwork. I am filing it." I opened my folder. I pulled out the fraud report. "This is a police report," I said. "It lists the identity theft regarding the hardware store line of credit." I pulled out the next document. "This is an affidavit for the bank. It states that the joint account was used without my authorization for structuring funds." I pulled out the third document. "This is a notification to the rental company. It declares the signature on Dad's wheelchair rental a forgery." My mother's smile didn't falter, but her eyes went hard, like glass beads. "You wouldn't," she said. "I already did." I said, "These are copies. The originals are with my attorney." She laughed. It was a sharp, dismissive sound. "Families don't do paperwork like strangers. Sadie, you are being dramatic. You are trying to hurt us because you are lonely. Put the papers away." "I am not lonely." I said, "I am free." "Free," she scoffed. "You are living in some grim industrial city, working a job that probably pays peanuts, using a fake name. That is not freedom. That is hiding. You belong here. You belong with us. We are the only ones who understand you. You don't understand me." I said, "You erased me." I reached into the folder and pulled out the graduation program. The coffee-stained booklet with the black line through my name. I slapped it onto the table. Tanya kept it. I said, My mother looked at the booklet. For a second, her composure wavered. A flicker of something ugly fear, or maybe just rage at being caught, crossed her face. "Tanya was a thief. She spat. She stole from us. She saved the evidence." I said, "You crossed out my name. Mom, you planned the party to conflict with my ceremony. You told Aunt Linda I didn't want them to come. I was protecting you," she snapped, her voice rising. People in the diner turned to look. She lowered her voice to a hiss. "You were getting arrogant. You were acting like that degree made you better than us, better than Chloe. I had to remind you where you came from. By humiliating me, by humbling you," she said. "And look what you did. You ran away. You abandoned your sister. You abandoned us." She pulled out her phone. "I am calling Chloe," she said. "She needs to hear this. She needs to hear her sister threatening to send her parents to jail." She dialed and put it on speaker. "Mom." Chloe's voice filled the booth. It was tinny and loud. "Did you find him? Is Dad with you?" "He is here," my mother said, glaring at my father. "And Sadie is here. She has police reports. Chloe, she says she is going to report us for fraud." There was a silence on the line. Then Chloe let out a laugh. "Fraud," she said. "Seriously, God. Sadie, you are such a drama queen. It is just money. We were going to pay it back. Eventually, it is $1,800 for a wheelchair." "Chloe," I said, "it is $5,000 for lumber. It is a trust fund you are hiding." "The trust is for the family," Chloe yelled. "It is for when Mom and Dad pass away. You are just mad because you aren't the primary beneficiary. I am mad because you stole my graduation." I said, "Oh, get over it," Chloe shouted. "That was years ago. And honestly, it was a good lesson for you. Mom said you needed to learn that the world doesn't revolve around you." We all agreed it was for the best. The table went quiet. We all agreed. I looked at my father. You agreed? I asked. He shrank against the vinyl booth. He looked at his hands. My mother smiled. It was a triumphant smile. See, we are a united front. Sadie, everyone agreed. You were the problem. You were the difficult one. My father made a sound. It was a low, guttural noise. Frank, be quiet. My mother snapped. No, he said. He looked up. His face was pale, but his jaw was set. No, he said again. Louder. Frank, don't you dare. My mother warned. Her eyes narrowed. I didn't agree, he said. He looked at me. I didn't agree. Sadie, she told me you didn't want us there. That is a lie, my mother hissed. You knew I knew because you made me do it, he shouted. The diner went silent. The trucker at the counter turned around. The waitress stopped pouring coffee. My father stood up. He was trembling, but he was standing. You did it on purpose. Eleanor, he said. His voice shook, but the words were clear. You sat at the kitchen table and you planned it. You laughed about it. You said, let us see how special she feels when she looks at those empty seats. Frank, my mother shrieked. She stood up too, grabbing his arm. Sit down. You are embarrassing me. I didn't want to do it, my father said to me, ignoring her. I wanted to go. I had the suit ready. I wanted to see you walk. But she said if I went, she would leave me. She said she would take the house. She said she would turn the girls against me. He pulled his arm away from her grip. You did it on purpose, he said again, looking at her with pure disgust. You broke her heart because you were bored. My mother stood there, her mouth opening and closing. The mask was gone. The reasonable, church-going matron had vanished. In her place was a woman contorted with fury. She turned to me. You did this, she snarled. You come back here with your fancy clothes and your legal papers, and you turn him against me. You poison everything you touch. I didn't flinch. I felt remarkably calm. The storm was finally outside of me, raging in the booth. Instead of inside my chest, I didn't turn him. Mom, I said, I just gave him an exit. I opened the folder one last time. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a document Elias had drafted called a Notice of Severance and Disclaimer. It wasn't a standard legal form. It was a declaration. It stated that Sadie Vance accepted no liability for any past, present, or future debts incurred by Eleanor or Frank Long. It stated that any further use of her identity would be prosecuted as a felony, and it stated that she formally waived any claim to the family estate, including the trust, in exchange for a complete release of liability. I took a pen from my purse. I am signing this. I said, Sadie, don't. My father said, you don't have to give up your share. The trust. There is money there. I don't want the money. Dad. I said, I don't want anything that has her name on it. I signed the paper. The ink was dark and permanent. Sadie Vance. I pushed the document toward my mother. This is your copy. I said, I have already filed the original with the county clerk. It is public record. If you try to open another account in my name, the system will flag it immediately. If you try to renew the storage unit, they will lock you out. My mother looked at the paper. Her hands were shaking. She wasn't shaking with fear. She was shaking with the impotence of a tyrant who had lost her army. You are ungrateful, she whispered. Her voice was low, vibrating with venom. After everything we gave you life. We gave you a home. We fed you. We clothed you. She leaned over the table, her face inches from mine. We made you, she hissed. I stood up. I picked up my folder. I picked up my car keys. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had spent 32 years keeping me small so she could feel big. I looked at the woman who had erased my name. You didn't give, I said. My voice was even, carrying through the silent diner. You collected. I looked at my father. Goodbye, Dad, I said. I turned and walked away. Sadie, my mother screamed behind me. You come back here. You can't just walk away. I own you. I pushed open the door. The bell chimed. The cold air of the parking lot hit me. It smelled of diesel and rain. I walked to my rental car. I didn't run. I walked with the steady, rhythmic stride of a woman who had nowhere to be but her own life. I heard the diner door bang open behind me. I heard my mother shouting something unintelligible. I didn't turn around. I got into the car. I locked the doors. I started the engine. I looked at the passenger seat. The folder was there. The proof. The police reports. The truth? I had the leverage. I could send them to jail. I could ruin their credit. I could drag them through court for years. But as I put the car in reverse, I realized I didn't want to. That was their game. That was the game of Briar Glen keeping score, holding grudges, fighting for inches of dirt in a mud pit. I was done playing. I pulled out of the parking lot. I turned onto the highway ramp. I accelerated, 50 miles per hour, 60, 70. The diner disappeared in the rearview mirror. Exit 44 faded into the distance. I watched the road ahead. It was a gray ribbon of asphalt stretching all the way to West Marrow, all the way to my quiet apartment, all the way to my job, all the way to Sadie Vance. I rolled down the window. The wind rushed in, loud and chaotic and wonderful. I took a deep breath. I was empty-handed. I had no inheritance. I had no parents. I had no history. But I had the car keys, and I had the road. And for the first time in 34 years, the silence in my head wasn't waiting for a command. It was just silence. I drove north, and I didn't look back. Thank you for listening to Sadie's story. It is a heavy one. I know. The hardest revenge isn't always about destroying the enemy. Sometimes, it is simply about refusing to let them destroy you. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and if you want to hear more stories about justice, betrayal, and the people who fight back, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have a new story coming next week that you won't want to miss. Until then, stay safe and keep your doors locked.